On Real Estate for Real Life podcasts, we sit down with standout business leaders to unpack what's actually working.
How they scale, lead teams, win clients, and build businesses that last. We're your hosts. I'm Courtney Gouchman.
And I'm Ryan Wilson. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome. Today, we have Scott Kriss from Kriss Law, Atlantic Closing, Escrow, and Affiliates. Thanks so much for joining, Scott.
You almost got it right.
Yeah, I was about
It was
right.
close.
Right? I think it was close. I think I nailed it.
It's a long name.
It's a big intro.
Wordy.
Yeah.
A big intro for one of the biggest residential real estate attorneys in the whole nation. Congrats on that, man.
Thank you. That and $5 get you a lousy sandwich.
Yeah.
But, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're
Well,
pumped to have you.
We're excited to have you. Obviously, we know you, and we're incredibly lucky to be neighbors with you, basically, right?
Yes.
One of the biggest closing companies in the nation. And we get to talk to you all the time, learn from you, and actually collaborate with you in business
And vice versa.
just, in entrepreneurship as well,
Yep.
too. So we're looking forward to getting into a conversation and diving into things that we don't even know as well as we'd like to. We want to hear more of the story of how you've built this massive firm and what kind of paths and the steps that you've taken to do this, the right hires, the wrong hires. We want to learn everything about how you've been able to get to 230 employees and 50 states in the U.S., right?
Just a kid from Rhode Island going to UMaine and now dominating the world.
I don't know about that. But, first of all, thank you guys for having me. And I can already tell how much better Courtney is at this than Ryan.
That's
Thank
factual.
you very
Yeah.
much.
It's
Yes.
the way this works.
Night and day.
Yeah, par for
Night
the
and
course.
day. There's no secret. People are always like, how'd you build this? It's what we do is still very analog. It's this, like Ryan is a big reason we are where we are, relationships like that, because I think what we've done, other than being very consistent, and consistency is a word I'm sure I'll use a bunch, is relationship development. And you become friends, like I know Ryan's kids, I know his wife, another person who's better at most things than Ryan is. But,
facts.
and that's really, there is no secret, it's just hard work every single day, the same thing. And I find that the people, whether in real estate, mortgage, in any industry, and I was just with some guys last night who I was telling you guys sold a pretty big tech company. They're just consistently working hard and, the phone rings, you answer it. And I've heard you say before, you talk about different things. You can always get a response. And that's really what it comes down to, being consistently responding, consistently being there for your clients. I don't care what industry it is. That's what we've done. There's no secret sauce whatsoever, in my opinion.
I remember when you started, I don't know if this is a tagline or what, but it was like, no call goes unreturned.
Yep.
And that is facts with you guys because, obviously you got some of the best attorneys in the industry, but you also got people that are willing to, work hard and actually respond very, very quickly because time matters in this business.
And in our business, it's changed a lot over the years. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I've always been very focused on my staff being really awesome as opposed to, people have just hired attorneys and great attorneys and what we do are important. I'm going to tell you, probably it's less important than the staff and the paralegal staff and the people doing all the behind the scenes things and answering the phone. That's what makes customers come back. The attorney is involved for a finite period in the transaction as opposed to a paralegal, let's say.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that about the staff, right? Because you just said there's no secret sauce and that it's, relatively simple in terms of consistency. But what's interesting about that is with 230 employees, essentially, you had to actually be able to set some sort of tone and then create a company culture that everyone else is the same way. Consistent, no call goes unanswered, that type of, commitment that you're hiring for. And that's something that takes a massive amount of skill. That's not easy to have that trickle down effect and make sure that the people you're hiring also have the same.
I think I made lots of mistakes, hired the wrong people a lot of the times, handled things poorly for a long time. I mean, I was a kid when I started, I was 26 maybe when I first opened my doors with one other, I was by myself basically. So you learn a lot, and I think I've hired the right people. Like my COO was basically like my right-hand person. The world has changed since 2020 when a lot of our growth has actually occurred, or the most recent growth has occurred. Not everyone's in the office. We have people who've been working for us for 5 years who I don't know. So while I think maybe initially I was the culture tone setter, it's other people now that have learned, and in a lot of ways they don't want me involved in the culture anymore because, I mean, at this point I'm almost 50. It's hard for me to relate to a 25-year-old clerk in the office. I try. I'm super friendly, and people will oftentimes actually think I'm like the janitor when I walk around because I wear like sweatpants and stuff.
It's one of the best stories ever.
Yeah.
Is it the outfit or?
Yeah, I mean, not this this is actually, I dressed up, but like I've actually had people come up to me in the office and be like, "Oh yeah, the leak is over there," and I'm just like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it. Whatever, that's fine."
My favorite was when the guy asked you like, "Hey, the water needs to be refilled over there in the kitchen."
Yeah, it's like, great, I'll do it. And I still and that's probably the other thing. Like, if there's a copy that needs to be made or what, we're still a small business, even though maybe to the outside world we look like some kind of big business. We're a small, tiny little business in the grand scheme of things, and you do whatever you have to do to make sure it survives and prospers.
Yeah, there's no one in the business that I know that works harder than you.
I appreciate that.
And you don't. Sometimes when you have that type of business, you don't have to.
Yeah.
A lot of times people put the foot off the gas. And one thing I'm really intrigued to hear about is not only have you not taken your foot off the gas, even though you've had many successful decades, but you're growing. And one of the ways you're growing is through mergers and acquisitions, which we've seen online, and that's super exciting.
Yep.
So tell us, and I want to hear about the beginning story as well, and we'll come back to that. But tell us kind of how that has transformed and what are you doing there?
So I'd say for the first 15 to 17 years of the company, I was all about, we're going to do this ourselves. We don't need to hire you or acquire you. We can do it better. We can take the business if we want it. That was always very insulated. So at the end or during the pandemic, when literally I was up all night running titles, trying to get, I mean, it was record volume, rates were in the twos. We know that whole story. I got to a point where I was like, I can't, we've hit a wall, we've hit a ceiling. I can't continue to do this, whatever it may be. So I actually sold off a piece of the company, the title piece of the company, or a portion of it to a private equity firm, because I looked at it and said, if we're either going to sort of stay at this level or we'll grow, we may have hit our ceiling locally, so we need to look more nationally. So that ended up being a very big learning experience. So I brought in this capital, brought in some help, had a board at that point, which, I actually ended up taking the company back over from the PE firm. Bad market, they didn't have an appetite for it, which often happens in these investment scenarios. But I kept my board. So now I have these guys who, one of my board members is in the foreclosure business, biggest foreclosure shop in the country. So he's got a really interesting look at the industry. And then my other board member he knows nothing about our industry. He's learned, but he was on the board of Verizon. Really smart guy. These guys are way smarter than I am. But I've never really had anybody who I can go to and say, hey, what do you think of this? And part of this was like, you can't grow organically anymore. You need to acquire other people or at least talk to them. So that opened my eyes a little bit. And we've had successes, we've had failures, we've had sort of, we look at it as like a C+ in some of these acquisitions. But at the end of the day, it's all about growing and growing market share. And so it was really interesting for me because I was always like, I don't need you. I don't want you. But it turns out we really do. Mm-hmm. We really need these people because everyone looks at things differently. And, it's been eye-opening.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, they've built a business themselves, right? So these smaller firms, they've built a business based on their secret sauce or whatever it might be. And in order for you to actually tap into their book of business, you kind of need their skill set, right? Yep. So I think that's what's so interesting about acquisitions. The piece that I cannot not always wrap my head around is kind of how do you then let them stay good at what they were doing in order to keep their clientele, however, also merge into your company and take on some of the Kriss Law type of aspects of it.
It's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's interesting that you point that out because it's what everyone struggles with when they're trying to merge cultures, especially we're really fast paced. We have to be because we do a lot of volume. And so you maybe have another person who did things differently. Thing we learned right up front when we really started upping our acquisitions. Our first real acquisition was back in like 15-ish. And then once we, sort of grew again and market up and market down, our first sort of big acquisition after that, we really tried to jam a square peg in a round hole. We were like, you're going to do it this way, even though it was different geographically, totally different culture. And after a while, we were just butting heads, and it wasn't productive. Do those people still work in the way I would like them to, or the way I do? No, but I've realized I'm not going to change that. They are what they are. We try to give them all the tools we can, technology, whatever it is. But you can't jam it in. We're going through it right now. We added 2 firms or 2 groups as of January 1 this year. It's been pretty smooth because geographically they're close, and we've learned a lot from other acquisitions. But we still have things where like at this point our finance system is pretty, for me anyway, because I'm a sales guy. I'm looking at P&Ls as much as I know to be dangerous, and so, we're looking, and some of these companies never had a formal P&L. So now they're like, well, what do you mean what do you mean we lost $10,000 last month? And it's like, well, you did. The numbers don't lie.
Right.
And so it's definitely an adjustment period. But the goal is that you bring all these people together. To get back to your question, Courtney, is you bring all these people together, and what you're really doing is taking off the admin stuff, because if you're just a closing attorney with 10 employees, you're doing everything. You're doing payroll manually, you're paying taxes, you're a paralegal some days, whatever it is. So to us, it's always been, if you can sell and you can bring in the business, then that's what we want you to do. And that's the rarest commodity, is being able to sell. Not unlike, you can find people to do the other stuff, but if you can sell, then we bring you in, and we just want you out there selling, going out and speaking our gospel and selling our product. And then you bring it back, you bring the business, and we'll handle it. We'll make sure you don't have to worry about it. We'll get the deals closed. Is it always smooth? Absolutely not. But really, their best use, we want them doing that. And as a small shop, you can't do that.
So with that being said, right, because that's definitely good information, what are the most important things that you need to see them transition into when you take over a company, right? Like, what are some of the top tier priorities that you're like, okay, if they can do this and this, then we can actually work cohesively together. But it's okay if they don't do something else. Right?
So honestly, it's getting them comfortable with not being so involved in their files. Like it takes a while to get to a point where, like, our paralegals they're definitely the highest paid in the industry on the East Coast for sure. I don't know about other parts. California is always sort of, analogous to us, or the West Coast. It's letting them do their job and not micromanaging them, which they've had to do maybe because, our paralegal, who with bonus is making $250,000, their paralegal maybe was making $80,000. And, they're not going to be as committed. They're not going to be as, don't have the same level of experience. No knock on those people. It takes a while to sort of get that. And paralegal and staff is so important in what we do that, it really takes a while for people to get comfortable. Like, oh, I don't need to worry if the CD went out. I don't need to worry if there's questions on X, Y, and Z. I know this person, so I can take my time away from the office and go take people out to play golf, take people out for lunch, whatever it may be, and selling.
Right. It's similar to us with a team. It's like the more you can take off a salesperson's plate, an attorney's plate, an agent's plate, the more you can take off from an admin, operations, marketing, biz dev, whatever it is. If you can take as much off that plate, then they'll have more time to sell and do what they're good at.
And I've gotten to the point now, and I'm pretty honest to a fault, it's in a business setting especially. I've said to people we're talking to, if you don't think you can pull back, this doesn't make sense, because you're going to give up some of your revenue for this help. Now, obviously, you have a lot. The hope is that you have a lot more equity, and at some point we'll, take another investment, and that's a big point of the whole thing. Is we're going to continue to grow, taking on money on the national side. Obviously, the attorney side is very different as far as selling part of the company, but we're giving these people this sort of ability to really, first of all, access to institutional funds, which is, it's a crazy business and process that you're just never going to get being, at a closing shop in Massachusetts, access to all these other areas, all that stuff. But, if that's not what you're looking to do, then it doesn't make sense, because you are going to be giving up some of your revenue in exchange for that.
That's a really good point, because it's similar to even, if we bring on an experienced agent, we do try to set the stage that you have to be really comfortable letting go of some of the control, right? And some entrepreneurs that have been doing their own thing for so many years and have had success, it's really hard for them to learn how to pivot and how to start to like ease up on all the facets of the business and start to just focus on the thing that they're really the most talented at, right? But I do think that that's how you actually grow. That's how you succeed. And it's also how I think you can just get a much better balance. People always say work-life balance, and it's like there's really no such thing. No. But what it boils down to is if you're doing the thing that you're the best at and the thing that comes the most natural for you, then it actually is more balanced because you're not forcing it in other areas of the industry.
It's so true. And for some people, and I've learned this, for me in my business, it's always been about the bottom line. Like I'm show up every day. I've made great friends. I love the people who some of my staff I've worked with for over 20 years now. We're basically like family. At the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line. So I can put food on the table, pay for college, all these things that we all think about. There's some people who don't think like that. They're in it they really enjoy the business. They really enjoy the legal part of it, or they really enjoy whatever it is. So their bottom line doesn't matter as much. That's not a fit for us. And we've just sort of learned that. And so we'll say it up front, if having your name on the door and being, XYZ law is the thing or XYZ title, great, do it. That's not what we're looking to do here. We're looking to, make your work-life balance, weird term for me, but we're looking to make what you do every day the best thing you do, like you said, and to make sure you're maximizing your compensation. That's not everybody, and that's fine. But I didn't realize that for a long time because I thought everybody sort of thought the way I did, and especially with it when attorneys are involved. There is something to the fact that a lot of attorneys love being attorneys. A lot of those attorneys, their parents were attorneys, and it's a thing. I can't relate to that. It's just not my thing, but I do get it now more so than
as you're going through that process, interviewing and deciding, running the numbers, like, does this make sense to bring them on? Yeah. Clearly it goes both ways. Like, there's a huge ego part because you're trying to pull these people that have run their own firm, their names on the door. Yep. How do you determine up front? Like, because I don't know anyone, whether it's in real estate or law, that's going to say, no, my ego is too big for this to join your company. But obviously we know that's the case. Yep. How do you determine that up front in the process?
I think you figure it out. These processes, that's the other thing that's interesting when you start to talk to these people. And sometimes it happens organically. Sometimes I reach out. Sometimes we'll have a buy-side banker who will be looking for these different opportunities, especially outside of this area. It's really it's a long process. You have an introductory call, you sign an NDA, then you start to get the financials, you start to work through them. I already told you, I'm not reviewing financials. I can see a top line, bottom line, but I have one of our finance people really get into it. And then the personality. So if the numbers work, then it becomes a personality thing, a cultural thing. And I try to tell people, when you join us, when the ink is dry, probably some of your people are going to leave. They're not going to want to go through our system. They might find, they may not. And we just saw it actually, an acquisition we lost. Somebody gave their notice recently, and no one was happy about it, but it wasn't a fit for them working at a bigger company. They had worked at a very small company, and that's okay. And it used to bother all of us, myself, Susan, our COO. But now we're just like, okay, there's, for the most part, everyone's replaceable. You don't always like to do it, but you have to keep that vision moving forward and that consistency. This is the format, while also not jamming people into different roles that don't make sense. So a role that, they might have prospered in might not work in our new system. Right.
So obviously we jumped into the mergers and acquisitions thing first.
Good transition.
I would love to hear more about just kind of some of the successes you've had with, you talked about hiring your COO and how that was a huge piece of gaining you that ability to get momentum and scale. What are some other hires that have gone really well, hires that didn't make sense for you that you had to move on from? And just in general, as you were continuing to build and grow, how did that path go for you? Was it just a steady increase like regularly? Did you have any setbacks?
Setbacks, can't even quantify the amount of setbacks.
Tell us about those.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when you asked the question is some of my top operations people, and I'd say almost all of them, have left and come back, which is interesting because it's so high pressure what we do. It's such a time crunch. The emails, my paralegals, my senior folks getting 700-800 emails a day, all that have to be responded to in some way. It's very high pressure. So a lot of times those people, my COO being one, she left. She was like, you know what, she was going to start a brewery with her husband, and she went to go work for a smaller firm briefly. The brewery didn't work out, thankfully, for both of us, I hope. And then she was at the smaller firm, and after a while I was like, this is, like, I've seen the way it's done on a grander scale. I'm sort of wasting my time here. There's no upward mobility. It's been really good for those people to see that. So they go to these other places. It's never easy. Like when Susan told me she was leaving, it was like the worst day ever. But then we slowly started, talking again, and I had to change some things. It wasn't just the system. It was me, too, the way I was micromanaging and all a learning experience. So, but when the people come back, I just had an attorney come back who's very valuable to our team. So that's one of the things is you have to not, and believe me, when I was 26, somebody would leave and I would burn the bridge. Like, I'd throw their stuff out in the street. It's emotional. You have the thing's your baby. So that's one of the big successes when people come back. So I've learned to maybe be like, okay, right now this isn't a fit. Go see what's out there. And the people we've wanted to come back have generally come back. So that's one thing.
Sorry to interrupt you, but a majority of the people that left and came back was their first job with you?
Not their first job, but were there for a really long time. Yeah. And the way I managed it when I was really involved, and not that I'm not really involved now, but it is a little bit different. I was way too up their asses. Excuse my language. You can edit that out. But way too much.
Just no cussing, please.
Yeah, we encourage
it. It's a very formal podcast.
I'm sorry. I generally don't cuss, only when I go to church. So you
step back. You had to learn to step back.
I had to learn to just eat, because easing off the gas makes people work a little bit better. Like, they're doing the best they can. Right. If you're calling me and being like, hey, this is a problem, well, I'm going to react. And Susan will always say to me, don't overreact. And so even now I have to take a step back before I fire off that email or call someone. And believe me, I still fly off the handle, because intensity is a huge part of being successful. I think you have to take it seriously, which I do. Step back a little bit and say, so that's a victory. There's been tons and tons and tons of failures. I mean, there's way more failures than victories, but you have to persevere. I mean, there's been days, I had a day recently where we had a problem and I was like, why, this isn't worth it anymore. Why am I doing this? It's so, but you just sort of wake up the next day. One thing I learned very early on, other than being consistent, is as bad of a Monday as it was, Tuesday is generally better. The next day you just sort of go home, go to sleep, tune out, which I've gotten better at doing. And then, so you'll learn to deal with the failures. But if you think you're going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to grow a business and it's going to be all roses, I mean, it's not even close.
I love hearing you say that, though, because obviously, you have business skills that are natural. But then what you had to do over all these years that you've been in business is you had to actually have personal growth, right? All of that sounds like you've self-reflected, and then you've actually corrected certain things, course corrected.
I don't think everybody's ever looked at me and said, oh, you've self-reflected. But that's great to hear.
You
looked inward.
I looked inward.
Clearly, there's so much depth.
You
must have gone on, I'm guessing, like a yoga retreat of some sort.
India.
And you really, you spoke to God.
And meditating every morning, I would guess. So.
And I do think there is some natural business skill. Like Ryan is great with people. He's like everybody's best friend, right? You can't learn that. And I don't think you can really learn to be a great salesperson. But where you come from is a big factor. I mean, like my dad ran a very small manufacturing company. My mother still has a retail store. So it was always a bootstrap kind of thing. And so when I started, I also had nothing to risk when I started. I didn't have anything. So it was, what can really happen? So there's some nurture there for sure. But it's also just your tolerance for pain. How badly do you want it? And again, being consistent. And like every single order that we get, every single new deal at some point, comes through me on a spreadsheet. So I just say, oh, we got a new deal from Ryan's team. Like send an email out to Charlotte, thank him for it. It's not rocket science, but I find it's something that people just don't do, because you also get people, and I saw this when I had, partners, private equity partners, there was a lot of stuff that was beneath them. And I've never felt that. Like, nothing in what we do is beneath them. If someone needs a phone call because they're really upset about something, I'll pick up the phone. Do I want to do it? No. But, it's one of those things, you take your lumps, and that's part of part of the deal.
I love that. I'm in the same way. You're not too good. We're not better than anyone else down the hall that's cleaning the place. And
I mean,
we're all working hard.
It's the other way for me. It's like and that a lot of this has changed too with employees. When I first started, it was the employer who was sort of the, thank you for the job. Now it's, thank you for coming to work. Thank you for not writing a Glassdoor review, and then it's a cyclical business. You guys know. So, we were at our peak, we were maybe close to 500 employees, about 480 during the pandemic. And then we had to lay off a ton of people because rates went up, a full 2 points over a short amount of time. That was a very different conversation in 2022 with the internet and Glassdoor than it was in 2005.
Right.
And so it's changed a lot.
That's hard. Yeah, I remember when your shop was on Walnut Street.
Yep.
Four Corners.
Yep.
And now you got a bunch of big offices nationally.
And we were on. We started in Newtonville, right over where the Star Market is. Over the pike there.
Forgot about that. Tell me about something that so for entrepreneurs that are listening, that whether they run a small real estate team, loan officers, you name it, whatever the small business is, what's a risk that you took? Because you probably still constantly taste risks.
Yep.
I mean, you're selling to private equity and moving things around and a lot of money moving back and forth. What was a risk you took early on that was beneficial and or didn't work out?
It's very clear. And this is back to Courtney's question, this is one of the things that I'm dealing with some of the people we've acquired, not being the face all the time. Like, I started to bring on attorneys because we were growing and I couldn't be there. The first year, maybe it was less than that, I was doing every closing, running around. And at some point you have to say, hey, Ryan, and we've done a good job at this. And now it's, you work with David a lot in our office, but he's not the one sitting at the closing generally. Right. So now he's figured it out. And so it was not being the face of, you can't be everything for everyone. Right. And I took the risk. Like, I definitely lost business. I reconnected with a realtor recently after 20 years who said, well, I stopped using you when you weren't at the closing. It's like, yeah, I think I made the right call for me. Right. It's okay. It worked out all right. Right. So yeah, that was the biggest risk. Because at that time when we were small, it could have been like, okay, I just lost all my business because I'm not sitting at, I'm not out there constantly.
Right. Like, it's simple. This is cliche, but like one step back.
Yep.
20 steps forward.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's actually one of the best examples of what the pain every entrepreneur feels when they start actually delegating a lot of their responsibilities in order to scale. Yep. And I think in any industry, no matter what it is, the minute you choose to say, or you choose the path of saying someone else can do this just as well as I can, because I need to focus my efforts elsewhere, you're going to always have that risk of losing something to gain so much more.
It's really, I look at it a lot like you go and see this band at a bar and there's like 20 people there and you love this band, but then they go and play at a bigger place. You're like, they sold out. And it's like, well, no, they're successful because they're good. The reason you like them. Well, so now you don't like them because they're having success. I think it should be the other way, really supporting that success. And that's what I found. A lot of people felt the same way, luckily. Yeah,
it's funny. I mean, if people say like, oh, it's they got a big shop over there. I'm like, yeah, they got a big shop and they've grown their business because they do a really good job. Yeah. And that means more people are calling, more people are wanting business.
More resources, more resources. Yeah. Our thought has always been big firm resources, small firm feel, which I think we do a pretty good job at. Not always. There's nothing is absolute, especially in what we do. There's too many details. First thing I say when I bring in a new client now is like, listen, we're gonna make mistakes. This is a mistake business. It's how we deal with the mistakes. Yeah. If you think we're not gonna make a mistake, then you're in the wrong. You're dealing with the wrong people because we're gonna. And that's maybe one of the most important things is we mess it up. We're gonna be the first one to say, hey, listen, we screwed this up. What can we do to make it better? Because it's inevitable.
Right. What are strategies? I'm just thinking of this like, so as you scale, as you grow, what are strategies to keep that super high touch?
Yeah.
Customer service, because let's be honest, plenty of companies, whether it be real estate firm or law firm, once they get bigger, it's less personal attention.
Yep.
Jerry Maguire,
it's that we've really segmented the process to the point where, so your clients, for example, they'll deal with an attorney and then they deal with one processor paralegal. So it's now the attorney and the paralegal, let's say, have a big team behind them. Every email that goes out is sent on behalf of that person. So to the consumer especially, and to your team, All they know is they have these two people,
Right.
you know, or if it's if there's not one of our attorneys involved, it's one person.
Right.
And it really simplifies. They do feel like we see some of our competitors have 10 people on an email, and the consumer doesn't know who to talk to.
Right.
That's been a huge thing we've done.
Yeah, it's making it more personalized, making it feel like they have two people, even though it's a huge shop.
Yep.
I always think about it, though, when anyone, like, I love the analogy you used about the band.
Yep.
But when anyone ever has an issue with a company being large scale, I'm like, so if you went in for surgery, right, and your surgeon only does 2 of these surgeries a year,
Right.
versus if your surgeon is pumping out that surgery at a rapid pace and has, a massive amount of clients, it's like, yeah, you might not get that like personal touch, but guess what? They're probably a lot more experienced and have seen it all. And with real estate, I think we can all agree.
Cost is a lot of people have said, well, you're cheaper, in some areas. And thankfully, that's been a bit of a fallacy. I think we're pretty market general now, or market middle, whatever. I don't know what I'm saying. And so, okay, well, we have the ability to do that. That doesn't mean that our service is, and I think you can attest to that, the service is as good as anyone, if not better.
Of course.
At a more affordable price. That's why people go to us. It's not because I'm a nice guy.
Right.
It's because we do a good job.
You could get something on Amazon.
Yep.
For cheaper, or you can go to your local mom and pop shop.
Right.
And pay a little bit more.
Right. And you know what? There's times when maybe you go to the local mom and pop shop. You have somebody who lives in a certain building in Beacon Hill that this attorney's done all the closing. Absolutely. Go to that attorney. They're involved in the condo litigation, whatever it may be. We're not for everyone, and that's fine. We're not for every deal, and you learn to live with that.
In your industry, just in general, so you've been residential real estate for years, growing consistently. What do you think the biggest mistake in the industry is?
Getting into it? No. I think it is.
It's a good way to get less
attorneys
competition.
classically are not good business people, because you don't learn business in law school.
Right.
You learn the law, you learn some writing skills. At least I didn't, and I C, if at best, law student, if you can believe that. I know it's hard to believe. You don't learn how to be a business person. And so I think that attorneys think that because they're attorneys or title people or whatever in different parts of the country, that means I'm a really good business person. I'm a licensed title agent, so that means I really know business. It's not. We're a sales and marketing company as much, if not more, as we are a law firm at this point. We're a service business, we're a sales company, we're a marketing company. We don't get too hung up on being attorneys. We have to be attorneys in Massachusetts. We have to be attorneys in Connecticut, South Carolina, North Carolina, the attorney states. But we take that same, we're a service business, so, and we move it into that. And so I think that's the biggest mistake. And people have chastised us for that. You're more concerned with having events than you are. I'm like, okay, well, that's how we connect with our clients. Sorry, that's our approach. Do it differently. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
That's how you build relationships and everything. But the interesting thing of what you just said with that is that, let's say someone comes out of law school and they really don't have that knack for business. They just don't have the gift that you have, right? They were A students. So, so let's say that's the case. To me, I look at that as know your strengths. You can still open up a phenomenal shop. You could still try to compete with Kriss Law. You will lose, but you can still try. But you have to hire someone who's going to have that other skill set.
Yes.
And I think that that's the biggest piece. There are so many industries out there that you actually have to be sales-oriented and business-oriented, but you actually went to school for something completely different because you're the talent of what you're doing, right? So if you were more practicing law, you would have to actually outsource more of the business side of things, right? And I think that that's, again, putting ego aside, which we talked about with the merger and acquisition. And I think that that's one of the biggest growth experiences you can have to grow your business is you have to actually grow as a human being and say, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Put my ego aside, hire accordingly. Hire someone who can absolutely be compatible and work with you, right?
Well said.
And I think that that's something that, I think about it all the time with attorneys, right? You guys are incredibly book smart. You're reading all the time, right? Again, you're someone who's gifted in the business sense of things, but most attorneys don't have that business side or sales side.
The gifted thing makes me feel weird because I think it's just working hard, but I get it. There's whatever knack I have. The gift that's just weird. No, it makes me uncomfortable.
I think you're very gifted.
Thank you.
We're in
You're
the
the
gifted
first.
program.
But I will say that a lot of attorneys insulting against us, which is, I get that too. We're one of the bigger, so people are like, well, Scott Kriss isn't really a good attorney. I'm like, yeah, I mean, are you a great attorney? Like, what we're doing in the grand scheme of legal work is not, we use a form contract. We all have form riders. We work with the same people on the other side all the time. So it's like, okay, well, if you want to hang your hat on being a great lawyer, that's great. I think you're probably in the wrong industry, part of the industry for that. To me, the great lawyers are doing M&A. They're doing really complex stuff. We are we're transactional. It's not saying I have great lawyers. David's a great lawyer. He's great at what he does. But unfortunately, that's not the business we're in. You get the business because of the service, not because of your legal know-how. So I think that's another piece that maybe some of our competitors have gotten too wrapped up in that. I went to law school because I didn't want to get a job after college. And it happened to work out. I found something that worked for me, but I never have thought I'm some kind of great legal mind. And I think it comes down to that ego thing. It's like, I just don't, some people are really wrapped up in it, and it's just it's a different mindset.
Right. The way I look at it is we're a customer service business that happens to represent buyers, sellers, and investors.
Yeah. And you know the basics. You're good at looking at a house. You're good at those things. But, I don't think any attorney that does what we do, or realtors, no one's splitting the atom here. Right. I think we've gotten a bit out of control with social media, certainly, and if I did a million things on Sitzer Burnett, I think a lot of that came about because of the way we portray ourselves in an industry, that everyone's millionaires. That's not the case.
It's the furthest thing from
it's
the
the
case.
Furthest thing from the case. And so, I think social media's done a lot of that, but I'm also old, and I don't want to, you guys know, I never want to do like pictures or anything. I'm not doing
even though you're very handsome,
this podcast I'm doing against my will. I want to put that.
Yes.
It's on the record.
We have forced it.
I want to put that out there.
Yeah.
So, I think that's like there's a whole cultural ego thing that you guys keep referring to that I couldn't agree with more.
Yeah. I think like you hit the nail on the head with the social media piece. I think right now everyone will say that industry's saturated or this is saturated. It's like, it's not saturated. It's that now we have so much visibility into everything.
Yep.
So there were always this many human beings, right? I mean, maybe we have more now, but for the most part, it's like there's always been a ton of competition. We just didn't see them so clearly and so easily because they weren't posting every single day, 365 days of the year.
We have a portion, I'm sorry to interrupt, we have a portion of our business that we've had for 20 years that never was really publicized, that recently was publicized because of a new partner we brought on. And it's caused this huge issue with people who just think this is something new. And I'm like, we've been doing this for years. And the only reason it's out there is because of social media, and it's like and so it gets skewed and people are like, you're doing this and you're doing that. And I never knew what anyone was doing. And I think it helped me grow my business before social media. So I just put my head down. I always assumed everyone was kicking my butt. I just assumed everyone's working harder than me. So I think it made me work harder. Yeah. And you sort of know too much now, I think.
Yeah.
It's definitely, especially in real estate, I think it feels very competitive when it doesn't need to be.
Totally.
Like you said, put your head down, stay in your lane, and just focus on what you're trying to do. And
Perception's
I think
not reality.
Totally.
But it's also when you're trying to grow something, like you mentioned, I think because of social media now, people are so fearful of taking that next step, taking that risk, because, everyone's going to know I failed or everyone's going to know it didn't work out. Who cares? Like, you've got to move on. But, years ago when you were taking those big risks, when you were 26, starting out, it wasn't so visible. It wasn't so public. Nope. People don't see all the little missteps, all the little mistakes, the employees that come and go, right?
I mean,
now it's like everyone sees it.
It was the point back then, like I'd be invited to like title insurance companies used to have these trips and stuff, and I wouldn't go because I didn't want anyone to know that I even qualified for the trip. It was just different, and now everything's so out there, and it makes me uncomfortable. I don't think it's necessary for business. I think it's, in a lot of ways, I think it's unbecoming. I've said this to you before. Like, if I'm going to sell a $2 million piece of property, I'm not sure I want that realtor that I'm going to use out there dancing. And I don't think that the consumer who's buying it, wants to see me out there, like whatever it is, wearing like a goofy hat. There's got to be some type of decorum in business to make you feel comfortable, I think. And I'm not a decorum guy by any means.
Right.
But when it comes to lots and lots of money at risk, I think you want to have people that are really trustworthy. But it might have passed me by at this point.
I'm sure there's plenty of people that have that opinion. For sure.
Yeah.
You got to be professional for sure.
Yeah,
definitely. Epitome of professional.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Totally. Yeah.
You basically wrote the book on business etiquette.
I did.
So
I did.
Now that we've gotten some of those tips from you, I would love to hear. It's probably hard to bottle this up. But what is one piece of advice that you would give, not just someone in your industry, so not just an attorney, any business owner who is looking to scale and knows that the next step is to actually get into acquisitions, because all the points that we talked about earlier, what would you say to get that started, to actually first step, what's the most important thing to do before you actually make those purchases?
I think it's you can't believe your own hype. I think that's the biggest thing. So when I took an investment in my title in Atlantic, the thinking was, okay, well, I can kind of step back from this. And I stepped back a little bit from it, and the business didn't work anymore. And it's like, you can't, it's not that kind of business. We've had people in the closing business, like I'm hiring a CEO because I'm going to step back. It never works. So you're either going to be in it, you have to be in it 100%, and you have to get your hands dirty in this industry. And I think it applied, these guys I was with last time I sold this tech company, we had the same conversation. I think they did so well because they were, knee deep in all of the bull for a year, right up until they sold. And so that's what it is. You cannot take your foot off the gas. You cannot say, well, I'm the CEO, I don't do that. I'm the this, I don't do that. We're not Raytheon here.
Right.
These are small businesses where you do everything you do to survive. Right. And unless you're independently wealthy or you have enough money where you never have to worry about a dollar again, I don't see how you can do it and sleep at night. So I think and I see it. I've seen it. I don't do this anymore. I don't do that anymore. I'm too big time for this. I hope I've never said that and never will, because I'm not too big time for anything. There's a very good chance I could have been out cutting lawns for my whole life. It just happened to work out for me. So
Okay.
Love that.
So don't have too big of an ego.
Yeah.
Get out knee deep in the bull,
Yeah.
I think you said.
Yeah, knee deep.
Knee deep in the bull.
Yeah.
So
knee deep in the bull. This is all. I assume this is never going to go out to anyone.
So,
No, this is we're actually not even
recording.
Yeah.
we're actually gonna delete the whole thing.
Yeah.
No, but that's actually, I do think that that's great advice. I'm messing with you on that, but that is good advice. I think that what you're saying is be humble and don't be. Don't let yourself get too ahead of where you're actually at.
We all have our moments, by the way.
Yeah.
Believe me, I'm a hypocrite in many ways, because I get on my high horse about some stuff I'm sure that I don't even realize, and Amanda will tell you that, or my daughter will tell you that, or my friends. But at least that's what you try to live by is, stay. You said that. I said it in like a half an hour. You said it. Stay humble. I could have just said that. So.
And work hard. One of your big things is, I remember you used to tell me back in the refi a few years ago during COVID, you would set an alarm at 3 a.m. to wake up just to be able to crush a few hours of emails.
Yep.
And then because you're going to have so many hundreds when you woke up.
Exactly.
And it's like, wow, that's another level of work that most people, I don't care what generation you're talking about, because there's all different stereotypes of generations. Most people don't have that level of work ethic, and hard work works.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to do that over and over again consistently, as you've said many times,
and there's nothing
can
wrong
be successful.
with being. That's the one thing I've learned from these acquisitions. Again, not to rehash it, but not everyone's like me. Not everyone's the same. Not everyone's like you. But if you're not like me, then you can't possibly expect to have the success that someone who works harder than you. Like there's a correlation there. Hard work, more money. Less hard work is okay, just less money. That's okay.
Right.
There's people out there who work way harder than me and make way more money than I do. It's just it's a choice.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I've loved having you on, man. This is great.
Thank you for having me.
I
I'll never
really
do
good.
this again.
This is great.
Well, I
Thank you
actually
for
was
having
going to say part 2 is going to be launching soon.
Okay.
No, this was awesome. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
guys for
It
having
me.
was
Thank you
really
again.
great to hear your story.
Kriss Law, Atlantic Closings, Escrow, and Affiliates.
Not even close.
Top
but
guy. I think I nailed it. And we appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having me,
much.
guys. All right.